You're listening to the 49 Carats Podcast, a 49ers Goldmine production with Stephanie Sanchez.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the 49 Carats Podcast. I'm your host, Steph. It is Friday, June 23rd, and joining me today is a special guest, his first time on 49 Carats, Paul Hope. Paul, how are you doing today?
I'm fine, thank you, Steph. Yep, first appearance, so international today for your audience, Steph. You've got someone from across the pond, so if anybody needs a translator or for me to repeat, just put it in the comments. I'm more than happy to oblige.
Yeah, of course. And for those of you who don't know who Paul is, he is the co-host of the 49ers Faithful UK podcast. He is also the VP of the 49ers Faithful UK group, which, I know you guys put a lot of great events together out in the UK for other 49er fans. And if you just could, just tell us a little bit about, the awesome stuff that you guys are doing out there in the UK for 49ers Faithful.
Yeah, so the 49er Faithful UK is a fan group in the UK. It originally started, Steph, as a Facebook page for all people on this side of the pond who stay up till crazy times in the morning, which you'll attest, because I've been on your show after a game in the comments and you've been like, you crazy Englishman, go to bed. It must be 5 o'clock in the morning across there. But last year, Nick Clark reached out to us from the 49ers.
Yeah.
The 49ers have got the UK marketing rights, and it still feels surreal that Nick Clark has been in constant contact with us. We were lucky enough to host the 49ers Supporters Club Live pod last year, and we had 3 official watch parties hosted by the 49ers and ourselves. So we've got big plans for this year. Nick Clark is a firm favourite of ours, and the gold mine at Levi's has been targeted for one of the games this year for the UK faithful to get across. I won't be across this year. I've got some family holidays, but trust me, Steph, once I make that journey to Levi's, every content creator will know, and I can't wait to party at Levi's with everyone.
Yeah, I'll have to make sure that I'm at that game if I can make it when you're out there. Because, I know that, the 49ers had that game in the UK not too long ago. And, there was a possibility that they'd be in the UK again this season, but that didn't happen. So, the next time that either there's a game over there, or you can make it to the Bay Area for a game, it's going to be a movie. So definitely be around for that. But today we're going to be talking about the linebackers. As we know, this is a very dead period of 49ers content. There's just really nothing going on. So what I'm doing is going through all of the position groups and, just talking about some of the questions that we have, some of the expectations that we have going into 2023. And so today we're going to be talking about the 49ers linebackers. And, before we go into anything else, we did get some news, and it's minor news, but just wanted to share as well of one of the 49ers linebackers, rookie linebacker, Mariano Soren-Marin. He was one of the undrafted free agents that the 49ers had signed. He was waived with an injury designation. And this tweet is from June 20th from David Lombardi saying that if Soren-Marin, if he wasn't claimed by Wednesday, he would revert to the 49ers roster and injured reserve list. He was not claimed, and so he's on the 49ers roster, I believe, right now, and so he's on injured reserve. And so they'll be able to keep him on the injured reserve list, or they could still release him if they reach an injury settlement. But that's like the latest news on him, if you guys were wondering or excited about him, because I know the 49ers undrafted free agent linebackers, it's like, you always left wondering, could this be the next guy? And we'll definitely talk about who could potentially be the next diamond in the rough out of this group. But first, let's just get into, the bigwigs, right? This group is still okay because it is led by Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw, probably the top linebacker group in the NFL. In fact, PFF had the 49ers linebackers as the highest graded group of 2022. Their run defense grade was 90.7 and their coverage grade was 88.5. And we all know that Fred Warner, he leads the pack out of this group, right? And I expect that to continue. You can set your watch to Fred Warner having a great year. It's almost like you don't even need to talk about him. Like talking about Fred Warner and what he can do this year is almost like cliche. Like we know he's going to be great. Like, and that's a great feeling to have. We have no questions when it comes to Fred Warner. But about Dre Greenlaw, he had a phenomenal season in 2022 and he made a big leap from the year prior. It seems like, yeah, he's not a perfect player still by any means, but he seems to get better every single year, right? And so last year, he had his highest snap count of his career. He only missed one game, if I recall correctly. And so he had his highest tackles total of his career with 105, 2 forced fumbles, allowed the lowest completion percentage of his career despite seeing like the most targets of his career as well. He had an interception, 3 pass breakups. If there's anything maybe that I'd like to see him improve on is maybe the penalties, right? Because like there's still some times where he gets the emotions get the best of him. And but Paul, like what do you think are realistic expectations for Dre Greenlaw after a much improved 2022? Like, do you think he can keep it up going forward?
I mean, it's interesting. We're all smirking because if you think back to this time last year, the conversation, Steph, was do we keep Greenlaw? Do we keep Al-Shaair? Do we look at trading Greenlaw? Now, we had a meet-up for the first game of the season. It was supposed to be the official watch party, but the sad passing of the Queen saw that kind of get postponed. But us Niner fans in the UK weren't going to let anything like that stop us from partying. And Greenlaw, that game, gave away some stupid penalties. And you're right, we've seen this flash of brilliance for him. Everybody watching, you think of Greenlaw, you think of the white jersey up in Seattle, you think of some of the big hits. But this time last year, there was a lot of talk. Should we keep him? I think he was a little bit annoyed, Steph, that he didn't have the contract. And then the news came out that we gave him that 2-year contract. Now, in the NFL, the 2-year contract isn't really a great deal. But for me, it settled him down. And like you said, it kind of cemented his position at the number 2. As Ty has said in the comments, you don't need PFF, but sometimes, Ty, you're very vocal of those content creators, buddy. Sometimes it's nice to know that the things that we're saying isn't just because we're Homer fans or because we've got our red and gold rose-tinted glasses on. When I was preparing for today, you're right, didn't even need to put anything in for Fred Warner. I've hung my Warner jersey up behind. I pressed the button on that last year. But you forget Fred Warner is the number 1 linebacker. So then you look at Greenlaw, and PFF had them both in the top 10. And it's crazy that we're both sitting now thinking, we want more from Greenlaw. When I was preparing, I was thinking he wants to outperform that contract. He wants a new contract. The fact that we've let Al-Shaair go, a lot of people were a bit disappointed, but the Niners have shown they're going to spend that money somewhere else. And we're going to touch upon his replacement. But for me, I think Greenlaw, he's looking at Fred. He's looking at that contract, Steph, and he thinks, I want a piece of that. And he wants to kind of cement his legacy as one of the best in the NFL. So I'm excited. I think Steve Wilkes coming in will use those linebackers slightly different to what we've used. He's been on record himself, Wilkes, and said, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the foundation of what you guys do up front. But he's going to sprinkle some of those linebacker blitzes. He's done that throughout his career. He's done that at the Browns. He's done that at the Panthers. And I'm excited to see it. I mean, Fred Warner, we all remember that tackle against the Rams where he was like a torpedo missile. But could we see Greenlaw mixed in there in blitzing the quarterback? I mean, where do you stand on Greenlaw? Are you excited? Do you think he's got more to show?
I'm definitely excited. I think as long as health is on his side, I think, the first few years of his career were kind of injury riddled here and there where, he didn't really get a chance to build on games and build on, improving because he'd be out a few games. He'd come back. He'd look a little rusty and then, he might get hurt again or something like that. So I think that has kind of hindered him in the past. Like I said, he only missed 1 game last season. So I think that helped him a lot. And so as long as health is on his side, he should be able to build on last season. It's easy. And you alluded to it as well. It's easy when you're playing next to the best linebacker in football and you can learn and absorb game from him, and I can tell that Dre Greenlaw's driven. You mentioned the contract as well. Definitely someone who I think is, motivated by contracts and, things like that. And he wants to be one of the best, next to Greenlaw. And I think both of those guys really pride themselves in being the best linebacker unit, and they're both going to want to keep that up. So I do think that, again, bearing health, right, that Greenlaw is going to continue to build on this. And I just think it's great that the 49ers have so many guys who you can argue are the best at their position. Some, it's not even an argument, right? Trent Williams, that's not an argument. He is the best at his position, but it's like those types of guys who are on this team, they help these younger guys, these guys who come a little bit after them, to help build them into wanting to be better players. Because guys like Fred Warner, guys like, Trent Williams, Nick Bosa, you see the work ethic that they have, and you like I could do that too. Like, it sets the example. So I think a lot of these guys, not just Dre Greenlaw, but there's a lot of guys on this team who I think have seen great examples from some of the, top guys on this team, and they can, in a way, follow in their footsteps as best they can. So I think Dre Greenlaw is under, incredible guidance. As we know, in the past, they've had Robert Saleh, they've had God, why did I just forget his name? D'Amico Ryans, who were both, from the linebacker background, right? And so I think that also helped a lot in both of their growth and this linebacker unit as well. Now, as you mentioned, we have a new defensive coordinator, right, in Steve Wilkes, and they'll have the same linebackers coach, which is great, and Johnny Holland. But to your point, can we see more blitzing, for these linebackers in 2023, right? Could that lead to more turnovers for this team, for this linebacker unit, right? 49ers were 20th in blitz rate last season. And, Steve Wilkes, the numbers show that he's been at like near the top in blitz rate at his stops. And as a defensive coordinator for the Browns back in 2019, he had a 35.3 blitz rate. That was fourth in the NFL. As a Panthers defensive coordinator and assistant head coach in 2017, he blitzed on 44% of dropbacks. So I think something's got to give, right? That 20th in the NFL in blitz rate, that's going to surely go up. So I think that's a great thing potentially for guys like Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw, because it's going to give them an opportunity to, maybe fill the stat sheet a little bit with some sacks, potentially at the very least. It's going to get some pressures on the quarterback. And as we know, that can lead to turnovers. I mean, a lot of the 49ers turnovers this past season came from, blitzes or just, pressure on the quarterback where they had to make an errant throw, quick throw that maybe they weren't seeing the field all the way, right? So that's something I'm really excited about, the potential of more blitzes and potentially how that can lead to more turnovers.
So, I mean, you forget as well, Steph, the modern linebacker. I mean, we've been spoilt as 49ers fans. I'm on record. My story started in 2012. So Willis and Bowman were my first jerseys as 49er fan. And I've been lucky enough to go from Willis and Bowman to Warner and Greenlaw. And when you look at what the modern linebacker does, and I think it's overlooked with Greenlaw before we move on, his playmaking ability. Yes, he's next to Fred Warner, but Greenlaw, that sideline to sideline. And like you've said, in the modern NFL, it's a pass-happy league, and getting after the quarterback is key. We've got Nick Bosa, who is a firm favourite of both mine and yours. But just think, if teams are going to just be preparing for Bosa, and then Wilkes is going to come in and sprinkle these linebackers who are hungry. Look at Fred. Mm-hmm. Look at some of the tackles he did last year. And equally, I think he might disguise some of the coverage with the linebackers dropping back and letting some of the other guys blitz. I mean, Isaiah Oliver has already been on record saying, I know I'm going to be blitzing this year. Hufanga will be rubbing his hands together. I mean, how he didn't sack Smith against Seattle when he just seemed to come off the edge wide open. And I think Hufanga was just as shocked as Smith. So I'm looking forward to seeing not just the linebackers blitz, but interesting to see what Wilkes does with this number one defense. And yes, we were all very vocal about this defense being number one, but I'm excited to see what we do. And I'm excited to see how we replace Al-Shaair, because he was a big loss. He's gone to the Titans. I don't know how you felt. It was strange seeing him in the uniform the other day. The tweet came out and I was like, he looks so much better in red and gold. But it's a business, so you've got to understand that he's gone and got paid.
Yeah, it was honestly, I knew that he was probably going to leave in free agency, right? Just because, and I honestly thought he was going to go to Houston with
Yeah.
D'Amico Ryans because it just made too much sense, right? But it makes sense also him going to the Titans with Ran Carthon over there as the GM now. So, and I think Rand, if I'm not mistaken, I think he had a lot to do with Al-Shaair getting drafted. Um, so I guess that connection does make sense. It is strange, but as we know, like the 49ers, it's like they're a linebacker factory kind of, right? At this point, their pipeline for linebackers is strong and they continue to develop guys into eventual starters either for their own team or other teams, right? That has helped them in the past where they've been able to, trade linebackers that were maybe undrafted free agents before, right? So there's value in that, even if it's not for this team specifically. But you raise the great question of who is going to be the Al-Shaair replacement, because I think obviously he was a great compliment to what Warner and Greenlaw was doing. Of course, he wasn't always getting a ton of snaps because he's the third linebacker, and the 49ers aren't always in those dime packages, but he was still an asset, and I think we can all see just how strong he was for this team. And despite having just a pass rush rate of 8.1, he actually had a pretty high pass rush grade from PFF, 86.5, which was the second top out of linebackers, right? So, pretty impressive from Azeez. And I think he did great as a run defender as well. So there's definitely a hole to fill on this, linebacker group. Again, it's maybe not the biggest hole just because you still have Greenlaw and Fred Warner. But like I said, it is going to be important in some of those downs. Who's going to be that guy, right? I think right now, if you look at who else the 49ers have, they have Oren Burks, Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles could also be an option for that role as well. If I had to guess, like it kind of just seems like Oren Burks is going to be that guy. Like I see his name get brought up quite a bit. And so as of right now, he seems like the obvious choice. Now training camp hasn't started. A lot of decisions, get made in training camp, right? So that could be when we get a better idea. But if I had to guess right now, I would say Oren Burks is probably up for that job right now.
Yeah, when I was preparing, I looked at Burke's his stats. I mean, I remember when we signed him last year, it seemed a strange signing, but you remember the 49ers tend to make signings or when we go into the draft with one eye on next year. And like you said, this time last year, we knew we weren't keeping the two of Greenlaw and Shaair. One of them was going to go. But Burks finished the year with an 82.2 run defense grade, which ranked among the top 5 of all the defenders on the 49ers in 2022. Now, yes, he didn't play a lot of snaps. And like you said, the 49ers have shown if you prove yourself in special teams, they've signed him to a new contract. As you've said, as it stands today, June, we've got to correct that because some people might clip this, Steph, and say, you and Paul said Owen Burks was going to be guaranteed, and then training camp comes along. And obviously, there's a couple of people we picked up. I mean, a lot of people are high on D Winters. Obviously, Jalen Graham is obviously fighting for a place on the roster. My good friend Nick Ludlam is cheering for Ball purely because he met him last year. He was out at Levi's and he got a signed jersey. So obviously, I can understand. But like you said, at the moment, for me, if I was a betting man, I would say Owen Burks looks like he's in the position, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, we're not making any proclamations here. We're not making any real predictions, but I just, just based on me seeing his name pop up quite a bit, I'd just say Oren Burks as of June 23rd, right? But of course, and anything can happen. And last training camp, I remember one of the guys that really stood out for me was, Marcelino McCrary-Ball, right? And he has the 3 names going. And as we know, Azeez, first it was Azeez Al-Shaair. Now it's Marcelino McCrary-Ball. They like the guys with the 3 names, so that might help him out. In all seriousness, Ball had a great training camp last season. He was a ball hawk, like he he just showed up well in those drills. They had that drill where like Kyle Shanahan will throw to like the linebackers running with like assistants. It's not even wide receivers, but it's just I think it's a ball hawk drill because you got to try to, break the pass up, or you got to try to get an interception or something like that. And so he showed up really well in those drills. Like he just looks like someone who has like great instincts and could move to the ball very well. And to me, that's what 49ers linebackers, that's what they do. That's how they look. That's how they play. Right. So he just looks like someone who's eventually going to be starting. Now, again, either for this team or someone else, right? I think, but to me, he just looks like the next guy up, whether it be this year or next. Oren Burks, to your point, he has shown the value through special teams, which it is valuable, whether, we think it's a huge deal or not. Teams do value that. If you can play special teams and play it well, you're going to have a spot on the roster. And not just that, you're going to be active on game days. So Oren Burks, for that reason, could be the guy who gets that opportunity, gets that Azeez Al-Shaair role. And because he's not going to be looking to play a ton of snaps per game, like that can be ideal for him, right? He's not going to be the Mike linebacker or anything, but he's going to be in a complementary role that could maybe, fit to his strengths a little bit better. So, I like that. Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, in the past, there's been times where, if Azeez was hurt, he'd come in and he'd play as well and he'd be fine. So either one of those guys I wouldn't be mad at. But going back to the conversation of, who's the diamond in the rough in this group, right? Because they have so many guys, and we talk about how great the 49ers are at developing linebackers, right? It seems like we've been so fortunate. You mentioned Patrick Willis and Bowman, and ever since then, it feels like there's always some linebacker that's just always flying to the ball, as the 49ers have had even before Fred Warner, right? And so I think I'm excited about the next group of guys who could potentially be playing, next to Warner, next to Greenlaw. However it all shakes out. I mentioned McCrary Ball, definitely someone who can be that in the future. D Winters, like I don't know what to make of him. Like I was really excited about him, and he looked good at the Senior Bowl, but there were reports that he was out of shape at OTAs, right? And coming into rookie minicamp. So his chances for making an impression in camp, I think, hinder on right now. Like he has to be getting into football shape. He has to go into training camp, in shape if he wants to make a really good impression for this season. Otherwise, okay, we'll see you next year. But D Winters definitely could be someone. Curtis Robinson, I don't know too much about him, but it seems like once in a while his name gets brought up. Jalen Graham, as we know, he was an undrafted free agent, right?
Yeah, he was undrafted, yeah.
Yeah. And then Mariano, as we mentioned, Sori Marin, he's on the IR list right now, so he can maybe stick around I guess he wouldn't be on the practice squad if he's on IR, but he could stick around till next year if the team decides to. So there's a lot of options here for, guys who could eventually, make that development into someone who they can't keep off the field, right? If I had to guess, McCrary Ball, maybe D Winters, maybe even Jalen Graham.
Yeah, I mean, again, you said that it's disappointing Winters turned up out of shape, because you look at the 49ers and you look at the linebackers and you said there's 4 names guaranteed, All-Pro Fred, Dre Greenlaw, Burks, Flanagan, Fowles, who I don't think we'll see after this year, but again, I could be wrong. And you've touched upon Ball's speed last year in preseason. He looked a little bit too fast at times. He was missing tackles. But like you said, the ball hawking ability is what we love in our linebackers. And when you get into this crazy game of American football across the pond, a lot of people think it's for the splashy quarterback plays, it's for the wide receivers. But actually, when you start to watch the game, it's the hard hits. And one of the reasons I fell in love with the 49ers was Patrick Willis. He was a cheat code at the NFL. And I don't mind sharing, Steph, when he retired, I was at work. So the YouTube notification went on my phone, looked at my phone, and I got a bit tearful One of my colleagues said, "Oh, have you had some bad news?" I was like, "Yeah, Patrick Willis is retired. That's bad news." And then, like you said, you fast forward to now, you've got, Fred Warner, you've got Greenlaw. But I'm hoping that we see a bit more of ball this year, because my good friend Nick Ludlam wouldn't forgive me if we didn't say that. I know a lot of people were pulling for Winters when we drafted, and Graham, he seems a strange one. But like you said, for me in the UK, I'll be eagerly awaiting all your tweets from training camp, all you and you guys who were fortunate enough to be over there. As I said to you off air, we live for the content you guys create, because we don't get TV coverage over here until the season starts. So we're on YouTube, we're on Twitter. And as you know, I'm always in the chat. I'm always supporting what you guys do. I just wished I could go to some of these training camps. It must be awesome seeing these guys live and kind of seeing it unfold in front of your eyes like it does for you guys.
Yeah, you definitely got to make it out like at least once, man, for one of those training camps. It is definitely fun. And last year was my first time, going to all of the practices. I'd gone to some of the practices before, but yeah, like if you're able to go for 1 week or 2 weeks of the time in training camp, you do kind of see some things, because you do kind of see like when guys start to stack their days, right? And I think Lenore, had some of those moments in training camp last year, and who knows who it's going to be this year, right? So, like I said, McCrary Ball was one of those guys last year who definitely looked good in training camp last year. So I'm just excited for who builds on the previous season, who builds on the previous training camp, right? And to your point, like Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, you made the point, he might not be here next year because he's just on the 1-year contract, right? But maybe that makes him a candidate for a potential trade. What if Marcelino McCrary Ball does look great in training camp? And you already have Warren Burks, so he's good to take that Azeez spot. McCrary Ball, good enough to, maybe be, move up in the depth pecking order, and suddenly you're able to maybe trade a guy like Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, get something back for him, right? That's what the 49ers have done or been able to do in the past, and I think it works for them because that's the strength of being able to develop guys. And you're always just churning the machine. So I think that's really valuable for them, and clearly doing a great job with this unit. Now, I know that we were, I wouldn't say worried. I wasn't worried about the fact that now they don't have a linebacker centered coach. I'm actually really excited about the fact that the 49ers have a secondary centered coach in Steve Wilkes that can help the secondary, because obviously that feels like the one area of the defense that could be improved, and so I'm excited about that. But I just wonder, I guess, will we see an impact to the linebacker unit because the defensive coordinator isn't as linebacker focused? So I guess that's the only question I have. But I think it could be a good thing regardless, because I think the one thing with these linebackers is a lot of them have experience either in college or high school as a former safety. Like Fred Warner, he used to be a safety. I believe D. Winters also, and Jalen Graham, if I'm not mistaken. So a lot of these guys have that positional versatility, or just like they know how to, kind of play different spots on the field. So I think that could be valuable for a guy like Steve Wilkes.
I think as well, the fact that we chose Wilkes, and the fact that some of the coaching staff you mentioned, Holland, Kuziak, if I've pronounced that wrong, I apologise, they sat in on the interview process, and we went for Steve Wilkes. A lot of people thought it was going to be Fangio, but Kyle Shanahan didn't want to change his scheme.
That's right.
And you look at Fred Warner, yes, we're going to gush over Fred Warner. He's the best in the league, but he showed that in his rookie year. He's had that under Salah. He's had that under Ryans. Fred Warner has been named as a de facto quarterback on the field. So can you imagine what he's like in training? Well, obviously, you don't need to imagine, because you see that. So again, I think that group runs itself. And I think, like you said, we're all excited as 49ers fans to see what Wilt can do for that secondary. I'll be the first to admit the Ward signing, I thought it was going to be good, but he was miles better than I expected. And I love the fact that he rocks that number 7 shirt, because Kaepernick was my first love in the NFL. So to see a Niner rocking number 7, like you said, he's brought in Oliver. It's going to be interesting to see what we do on the secondary, which again, the 49ers are known for that awesome front 7, Nick Bosa, and then you look at Warner. And now it's going to be interesting to see whether the secondary steps up, Steph, and whether that's going to be the talking point of the team next year. And I'm excited. And as 49ers fans, you should be excited. This was the number 1 ranked defense by far. And for me, as much as I was upset at losing Ryans, I'm excited by the Wilkes signing, and I'm excited to see what this bunch of players can do next year, because there's going to be a different focus. And Wilkes has been very clear. And I think Shanahan has said, I want you to keep the same scheme, but equally, I want you to put your magic on it. And I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. And I think we're going to see potentially even more turnovers, because the 49ers were one of the top teams in turnovers last season. And I still feel like they can get even better at it. Crazy to think, right? Just because of some of the changes that we might see to the secondary, more aggressiveness as far as like the blitzing goes, as we've seen. The 49ers and this linebacker unit really held down the middle of the field. Like, you could not throw in the middle of the field. That was like a no-fly zone. Now, if other areas of the team are improved, let's say the defensive line, let's say the secondary, maybe everywhere on the field will be like a no-fly zone, right? So I think that's the kind of, improvements we're really hoping to see. And I'm just really excited. I'm excited about this linebacker unit. Of course, like I said, I think that Dre Greenlaw will have another good season. Of course, like the health is a big thing, but I think with Fred Warner on his side, like you can't lose. You really can't. And you just continue to improve each year. I think he's going to see, even more growth this year. And hopefully Oren Burks can, fall in line with that as well, right? Just absorbing more from Fred Warner too. So I'm looking for Oren Burks to, potentially take on that bigger role and run with it, because it's there for him.
And I mean, you go back to the Dallas game, the playoff game. I've been rewatching the playoff games because I'm a Niners fan. I don't do English football. And I think it was forgotten now, but not at the time, when Warner picked off the route by Lamb. And for a linebacker to be basically in the coverage that he was, and the fact that Dallas took a delay of play penalty the next play, because I think even they were like, how has Fred Warner got back there? And even me, I was like, he's good, but my God, he's good. And you think it's going to be stuff like that. And the tackle against the Rams, where we touched upon it earlier, where it was like a missile, a heat-seeking missile, is what Fred Warner has been described as. And like you said, if the players around him are going to get better, and like you said, training camp, I'm excited for training camp. And when you messaged and said, do you want to come on? And I was looking at the position groups, and we were torn between linebackers and wide receivers. Mm-hmm. And then your good friend Jason Aponte did a show, and he was talking wide receivers, and I forgot Jason is the wide receiver king. I thought, yeah, I can't talk about wide receivers. But then you said linebackers, and you think it's an exciting time as a 49ers fan. There's a lot of talk about the QB position, and obviously that's what gets the clicks. But when I was sitting down today and I was thinking, we are spoiled at linebackers. If teams had one of Fred Warner or Dre Greenlaw, we would hear about it. And the fact that PFF have come out and said, yes, we're the number 1. I didn't even look down the list. I knew we were number 1 by far, but the fact that we've kind of had that rubber stamp by them. And like Ty said, we don't need it, but it always is good to see that the 49ers have the number 1 ranked linebacking group on the number 1 defense in the league.
It's just validation, right? Like, we don't need it, but like you said, it's like, well, maybe we feel that like they're the best because maybe we're homers. Like, I don't know. Maybe there's just a little bit of bias, but like for other people to agree, it's like, yeah, see, like it's not just us who thinks that, right? So I think it definitely feels good. We are definitely spoiled. I look forward to being spoiled with great linebackers for many years to come, because they have a great foundation, and like I said, they continue to develop guys. So I think they're in great hands. I mean, and just going back really quickly to like the coaching discussion of like, oh, like now they don't have a linebacker centered coach. I almost feel like they don't even need a linebacker centered defensive coordinator, just because like you have the best linebacker in football. He's almost like a coach in a way too. And I know like even in OTAs, Fred Warner was not participating, but he was, coaching up some of the younger guys and talking to them in between reps and things like that. So that's what you have. Like you don't necessarily need D'Amico Ryans, Robert Sala. I think Fred Warner could be that guy in the future. Maybe, I don't know if Fred Warner wants to go into coaching, but like I feel like if he wanted to, he would be great at it, right? And so I think because of that, I think this linebacker group is in great hands as well. Not just because of the defensive coordinators, but just because the leadership that's there and the accountability that's expected for that group. But yeah, like it's an exciting time for this defense, for this 49ers team. Really, really enjoyed talking linebackers with you, Paul, and really enjoyed having you here on the show today. Hopefully it won't be the last time. And anytime, that you come out here or to the States, I'll make the trip out to the Bay. Because as you know, I'm in Colorado actually. So for the past 2 years. So, but if you ever come out here, I'll try to be out there.
Well, before we finish off, you alluded to we have our own show on the 49er Faithful UK, and I'm glad John V is in the comments. So my colleague Nick, he stole an idea from John called Would You Rather? So every Tuesday, Steph, my friend Nick is rather evil, and he gives me a scenario of 49ers called Would You Rather? And because we're talking linebackers, I wanted to give you a hypothetical scenario. So my Would You Rather to you, Steph, is you've got a choice of Patrick Willis and Dre Greenlaw, or Fred Warner and Bowman. So if you could only have the combination, which one are you having?
You said Fred Warner and Bowman?
Yeah, so and Willis and Greenlaw.
Oh, okay.
So you've got Willis and Greenlaw as a partnership, and you've got Bowman and Warner as a partnership. So which one are you taking?
I think I'd go Warner and Bowman, just because, like, I feel like we were robbed of I feel we were robbed a bit of Bowman's full potential, just because of like, his ACL tear. I think he was on his way to being just as good as Patrick Willis. And, unfortunately, that kind of set him back a little bit, so we didn't get to see that. But let's just say that never happened. I think he'd be in that conversation of like, wow, is Bowman just as good as Patrick Willis? Is he better? Like, we'd have that conversation. I feel like it was already starting to take place, right, with him. We were just robbed a bit of that. And so, like, Fred Warner being as good as he is right now, and they're different kind of linebackers, right? I think Willis and Bowman were the perfect type of linebackers for that era of football. Now the game's played a little bit differently. You have to be a little more athletic. You have to be able to play a little more sideline to sideline. Now I think that Fred Warner really fits today's NFL great. But just as a tandem, if I had to pick, I think I'd say Fred Warner and Bowman. And also because, like, I think Greenlaw's not at that level yet. He's not really at that level where I'd be comfortable, picking a group that he's in quite yet. But Fred Warner and Bowman. What about you?
Well, I would go with Warner as well. I had to mix them up because if you put Warner and Willis together, I think that's most people's dream combination. And like I said, my friend Nick is a lot more evil to me than I was going to be to you, Steph. So I'm grateful for you having me on. And hopefully it's not my last one. But I did see that from John. So yeah, Willis and Greenlaw probably would. You're right, John. Injure the majority of running backs and anyone dumb enough to go through the middle. But I just thought I'd ask you that question.
That's a great question. That's a good, little game there of, who would you rather have or who would you rather? Because it really gets you thinking. It really does. But Paul, thanks so much for joining me today. Thanks all you guys that, you know, came through in the comments. You guys were popping in the comments today. Really appreciate it. Paul, you have a ton of support, not just from the UK, but just all 49ers faithful. I see it, you know, on Twitter. I see it here in the comments today. And just continue, you know, doing what you're doing, man. I think it's really great. I love that, you know, the 49ers have a huge market in the UK, and hopefully the UK can eventually get an NFL team. You'll still be a 49er faithful, I'm sure, if that were to happen. But, you know, I think that'd be great. It's coming one day. You know, it's only a matter of time. So that'd be really awesome. But thank you, Paul. Let everyone know where they can find you, your podcast, all that.
Yeah, so as you've said, I am known for Twitter, and I never apologise for tweeting 49ers. I do love the support I have from the content creators and all my friends across the pond. So yeah, I'm at Paul_Hope10, and I'm also the social media guy for the 49er Faithful UK. So just search 49er Faithful UK, Steph, wherever you get your content from. We've got our own YouTube channel. We've got our own podcast. We try to bring a little bit of what you guys do to the UK market, but equally, we always give credit where credit's due. And like I said, I'm not even joking when I said, when you're at training camp, I'll be on your tweets. Your draft list was invaluable to me. You kept updating that. How you had the time to put on where every 49er player that they met with was unbelievable. And like you said, likewise, keep up what you're doing. People across the pond know who you are. When I name dropped that I was coming on your show, everybody was blown away. I have two daughters, 13 and 16, and they were like, what, you going on with a girl to talk football? Is that allowed? And I was like,
awesome.
yes, girls, that is allowed. And we encourage it very much so. So I know they're downstairs watching at the moment. And I just want to say thank you again for having me on. I've had a great time. And hopefully when the season starts, we'll be back again to check our predictions of the linebacker group.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, thank you so much once again. And thank you guys in the comments. Make sure you guys like this video. Make sure you guys subscribe if you have not yet. But for now, have a good rest of your Friday, people. Peace.